Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so that you can head on off wherever you may be going. And if your community is still having Independence Day celebrations, you probably will run into somebody who's got something to say about the founding of America. So go back through the archives of this program at our YouTube channel, Freedom and Prosperity Radio, and you'll be at least better prepared for what's coming next. But joining us now, we've talked about the constitutional construct, and so frequently people ask me, how can insert Governor Ralph Northam, the Virginia General Assembly, you name it, how can so-and-so do this? It's patently unconstitutional. Well, there's this fella named Jim Crow that sort of, set the standard for the government behaving unconstitutionally. And the way we beat Jim Crow, old Jim Crow, was in the courts. And often what has to happen is the legislatures will pass unconstitutional laws, and somebody has to bring them to court in order to get a judge's ruling as to whether they're constitutional or not. Such is the case with turning our businesses, especially the small ones, into the mask police, if you will. And there's a suit right now hoping to become a class action suit, but right now I believe it is just the owner of Tobys Pawn Shop in Charlottesville, Virginia, versus Ralph Northam et al. And his attorney is not a stranger to the program. We've talked to him before, former Greene County Commonwealth's attorney, part of several great law firms that fight for constitutional rights. He is Matthew Hardin. Matt, thank you for taking some time out with us this week. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, Joe, and thanks for having me on.
Did I undersell the predicate of this story?
I think it's the most important story in the world that we have a governor who thinks that he's a king.
Well, and not even that he wants to, send his sheriff of Nottingham out. He wants to turn the business owners under the threat of losing their license to do what they do into his deputized little sheriffs of Nottingham.
It's amazing to me the extent to which ordinary citizens, initially it was caved to pressure, but now we seem to just be accepting that the government by edict can tell us what to do. And I always thought it was the legislature that made the laws and the governor just enforced them, but everything's upside down right now.
I was talking to State Senator Mark Peake from the 22nd District, and he's trying to push the governor the way the Pennsylvania legislature just did, which is to put the clamps on the governor's emergency powers because the governor has no end in sight to the emergencies. And unfortunately, I guess the code never quite figured out pandemic might fall into the category of emergency. So it gets to be Dr. Forlano, I guess, Dr. Oliver gets to decide when these states of emergency ends, and that's what Mark Peake wants to do, is write some legislative language that kind of puts an end date on how long Ralph Northam or any governor can just declare a state of emergency.
Well, the whole idea behind emergency powers is sometimes an emergency is so serious we have to act quickly, and so we can't go through the normal procedures because it's so urgent. If a tornado strikes, you don't have any warning, and we need to do things in a hurry to recover. This is the exact opposite. We may have had a need to act quickly in March, maybe. I'm not sure we did, but if we did, it was back then. We've been living under this authoritarian system now for 3 months, and I don't understand that. 3 months is plenty of time for legislation. 3 months is plenty of time for the normal administrative process if they needed to promulgate new regulations. There's no reason 3 months in we still have to be living under an autocrat.
It's interesting because when I was talking to Mark, he brought up Peterson. So, at first blush, you would say the General Assembly is all Democrat-led now, so what would they do to Ralph Northam? But there are Democrats in the General Assembly that aren't sanguine with the governor's unending executive powers.
Well, I think that the legislature is well equipped to sort of put a leash on the governor because they all ran for office, presumably because they wanted to represent the people and get to write the laws. And right now, we're supposed to have three co-equal branches of government, but we seem to only have one branch of government, and that's not how it's supposed to work. And the legislators ran for office, hopefully, to have a voice, and right now they're being silenced too.
So tell me about the lawsuit. Let the listener know as to what is going on. Toby is a small business owner. He has two shops. They are open, and they've been open because they were declared an essential business through the whole COVID-19 shutdowns because they deal in Second Amendment, let's say, facilities. So being able to stay open, he has seen the impact of the pandemic on so many people, but now he's very concerned with this mask, correct?
Absolutely. I think Toby always was concerned when people came into his store with hoodies or masks, because when you have firearms and a lot of valuable equipment and cash even on hand, it's scary when you have people come in with a mask. You always wonder if they're up to no good.
Sure.
Now, under this new regime, I guess, that we have out of Richmond, it's this weird situation where now people are supposedly required to wear masks under the governor's order, executive order number 63, but they're also prohibited from wearing masks because we have a longstanding ban in the Commonwealth of Virginia on wearing masks that conceal your identity. So Toby's a business owner, and he doesn't know what to do. He always had a policy, sort of informal policy, not written down, but he would ask people to remove things that covered their face in his store for safety reasons. But now the governor says people have to wear masks in his store, and by the way, if Toby doesn't enforce that, he might lose his business license or have the Department of Health shut him down. So he's in a bad spot, and that's why he's suing the governor to get executive order number 63 thrown out.
So that's, you bring up the great conflict in this, because there's been a longstanding Virginia law that says it's a 5-year penalty, 5 years in prison if convicted for the maximum charge of wearing a mask to conceal your identity. I was wearing a mask for some time when it was voluntary, and I still do because I have concern for coworkers' comorbidities. But I'm not doing it because the governor told me to. I did it because the South Koreans and the Hong Kong medical community said, hey, we've done some research and you're infectious for 2 days before you even know you have this bug. By the way, I'd like a doctor, if there's one out there that's working on figuring that part out. I'd really like to hear about it. But you bring up the real kicker, which is this licensure society we live in, where the government has to give you permission to do anything at all. We'll circle back to the lawsuit and the particulars and perhaps any other businesses that might want to join it. But talk about Virginia and this kind of, King's Grant era, 16th century idea that the lord of the realm has to give you permission just to open a shop and cut hair.
Well, it's amazing. And I think that the government has consistently over the past few decades restricted us more and more and more. And then they give back our rights if we get a permit. And it's amazing. I think that anybody that's ever built their own house or their own barn or even garage or tried to paint their porch a different color in a association, homeowners association, knows the bureaucracy that we all live under now. And it's unfortunate generally, but it's gotten extreme during this supposed pandemic.
So get us into the particulars of the lawsuit. We're talking with Matthew Hardin, who is the attorney for Tobys Pawn Shop. Toby Bouch, who is the owner, is suing the governor. I know that when I first talked to you, you were hoping that maybe other business owners would join in to kind of create a class action situation. But catch us up on the particulars of the lawsuit, Matthew.
Well, we now have 3 of these lawsuits. There's a business in Fluvanna that's suing and a business in Fauquier as well. So there are now 3 business owners challenging the governor. And that's encouraging that more business owners are stepping up, because it's really putting those businesses at risk. I mean, they challenge the governor. What's he going to do to them next, which is unfortunate. But what the lawsuit's pointing out is we've had for years 18.2-422 of the Code of Virginia, goes back to at least the Code of Virginia in 1950. Says that if you wear a mask to conceal your identity in public, it's a Class 6 felony. That came out of the Klan violence in the early part of this century and the late part of the last one, where basically the Klan was using masks to intimidate minorities, which was something the legislature wanted to combat, so they made it illegal. And that's been the law since at least 1950. We've actually increased the penalty. It used to be a misdemeanor. Now it's a felony. And the governor has unilaterally declared now under Executive Order 63 that it is a misdemeanor if you don't wear a mask in public. And so you've got this really weird situation that Tobys and all of his customers are in, where if they wear a mask, it's a felony. If they don't wear a mask, it's a misdemeanor. But they're subject to criminal liability either way. So what the lawsuit is doing is saying we need a court to strike down one or the other. We either need a court to say that you're not liable under criminal penalty if you wear a mask or if you don't, but we can't have people subject to criminal activity or criminal charges, rather, no matter what they do, which is the situation we're in right now.
So where do you go next? What is the next step? Give us the timeline of events coming up here, Matt.
Well, so normally a lawsuit lasts months or even years, and so what we've done is we filed an emergency motion for a temporary injunction while these cases are pending. What we're telling the judges we don't want the local law enforcement or the governor or the Department of Health to be able to charge anybody for violating the law while this lawsuit is pending because, again, right now you don't know what to do. You're in this situation where you're charged either way. We have filed emergency motions to enjoin enforcement, and the courts are being slow to hear that. The courts in Fauquier County has requested briefing, and it'll be at least 2 weeks until we get a ruling up there, probably longer. And in Albemarle County, a judge recused, and so we have to wait on a new judge to be assigned. So unfortunately, the process has bogged down a little bit. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure this case doesn't take 6 months because business owners can't afford it, and neither can citizens to live 6 months under a regime where every time they go to Walmart, they don't know if they're committing a misdemeanor or a felony.
So how can we help? Can people help support the cause? Are you still looking for businesses to join in?
Any business that wants to combat the governor's orders, I'm happy to hear from them. My website is MatthewHardin.com, and my cell number is 434-202-4224. I've heard from business owners across the state, and I'd love to hear from more because it's important that we stand up and challenge the government when it overreaches. But you can also contact Toby at Tobys Pawn Shop. He is a business owner who's doing the right thing. And I think he needs our support, too, because he's put himself out on a limb. He has become a target for the left. If you look at what some of the commentators on these internet forums have said about Toby, it's amazing. So business owners need our support. They're really in the worst spot right now because although I don't like the governor's order and what he's trying to do to my rights, these business owners are in a situation where they could lose their livelihood no matter what. And if they stand up, they're even more nervous because that makes them subject to retaliation. So do everything you can to support the businesses that are standing up to the governor.
Matthew, thank you so much for your time this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio, and keep us informed in any way we can help here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy.
Thank you, Joe. I sure will.
Is there something good we can learn from the COVID-19 shutdowns? Lindsay Burke, education expert from the Heritage Foundation, is next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.